Okay, welcome everybody and good afternoon. Welcome to the special regional council meeting of July the 14th. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional territory of our friends, neighbors and partners, Treaty 8, the Denizhaw people of Fort Nelson and Prophet River First Nations. Further recognize our treaty and the rights inherent in that treaty, as well as the enduring presence of the Métis people in our region. Please be advised that today's meeting is available to the public to attend virtually, as is being streamed and recorded. So first item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda. I'd like to change the agenda a little bit and move 5 up before the report. I think there's 5 is really going in camera to talk about land sale. And I think there's probably at least one thing we should talk about before we get into the rest of the report. So resolution to move into a closed meeting.
I'll make that resolution.
Okay, moved by Councillor Roper. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Enax, all in favor? Anybody opposed? Seeing none, then we will move into a closed part of the meeting and then come back to the regular part of the meeting. Okay, thank you, everybody. We've adjourned the in-camera portion of this meeting and we are back to the regular meeting. So that brings us to reports. Did we adopt the agenda for this meeting? Okay, we need to adopt the agenda for the rest of this meeting. So somebody to move that, please. Moved by Councillor Roper. Do I have seconder? Councillor Souls. Thank you. All in favor? Are there any opposed? Seeing none, then that's adopted. That brings us to report 3.1. Sorry, agenda item 3.1, administrative report number 4225, the fire hall and public works facility options. And I will turn it over to staff to talk about the 3 different options there.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Barrett. Yep.
Just at the table with me is Chief Childs, with Harvey with us, and Sean. Obviously, Josh is away today. He'd be sitting up there also. We all had a bit of a part to play with this process. Harv took a line share of the lead with Sean in terms of the scope of work and working through the various details, and this has been a work in progress for quite some time, even prior to the evacuation. The current Public Works fire hall facility has insufficient space for both departments to work out of, and it's been that way since the Public Works and fire hall worked out of there. It's not a new issue. The issue has become a little bit it has changed through the years and been a little come worsened over through the years with increased services, and of course you look at space that was tight already, and then new equipment. Will pick on the rescue truck, for example. I mean, the original rescue truck it's the little red one that buzzes around town. What Public Works uses now as a utilities vehicle. But of course, as standards change, requirements change, and then things get bigger. So the new rescue truck takes up more space. So as time goes on, you take up more space, but the space doesn't can accommodate it. So what we did is through a process. So basically, that space is not adequate for both departments. We have code and safety requirements that need to be met. Specifically, some significant ones for fire that through the years, as this process has gone on, that we haven't upgraded that hall because we want to make sure that we were going to be not throwing good money at bad and making an upgrade in an area that just didn't make sense. So a lot of this work's been occurring for quite some time. And there's some operational inefficiencies in that facility currently. The other piece with it is the need for business continuity and post-disaster safety after or during an incident, which was the reason last year why we moved the fire department to the Cameron building. We knew the Cameron building, a lot of this legwork had already been done in terms of which facility and community would be used if we were purchasing one potentially. And we knew during the evacuation that, very quickly with a conversation with BC Wildfire that we needed to move the fire department to that building, that facility, because it was a much safer facility to work out of for room, but also from a post-disaster perspective. in terms of the type of structure it is to have the fire department work at it and essentially shelter in place if they had to, which was part of their safety plan if they had an issue. And the reason why they stayed in community during the whole evacuation or could stay in the community. When we reviewed this, we had three options. We either had an option to purchase a facility, or sorry, to build a facility, which in the report, if you look at the report, that way option one is to build a facility from the ground up. The price is fairly extravagant, that estimated at $24 million. That's a Class D cost estimate. You know, when we went through the process to try to be frugal and not spend unnecessary funds, we didn't proceed down that path any further just because of the costs that we looked. And when we looked across the board, and in the past, we've been compared to communities like Fernie. So I'll bring Fernie up today and say that if you look on Fernie's website, they're building a new fire hall today. Just over $20 million. So in terms of not necessarily physical size and from land mass perspective, but we've been compared in the past just based on similar services, and we used to have similar populations. So the building of a new fire hall was something that obviously we investigated from an option perspective, but we didn't proceed with that and don't recommend it, of course. The next option, which is option 2 in the report, and I like to add, you'll notice the numbers in the report are differing from what I've passed out what we have in our report, because they've been refined. So when we received that report back in February, the final draft of the report, then we got to work and looked at scope and confirmed costing. And of course, the costing at the time, even for the purchase and the upgrade of the public works, or sorry, the Cameron building, was at early cost estimates. So the new numbers that you see in the report are the refinement of that document. We didn't, again, find the need to go and redo the document and pay money to redo the document as is, because the information in it, in terms a lot of the scope of work and the activities and the requirements are the same. It's just some of the costs are different. And we significantly reduced some of the work that was in there, that scope of work wise for the existing public works fire hall. So the second option was to look at keeping the fire department in the existing fire hall facility with public works, which had a significant impact to that facility with the required upgrades in that facility. There are a significant amount of upgrades required to meet the life safety standards and the code requirements, which required to take up a lot of additional space. So the dorm upstairs that the firefighters stay at when they're in hall and working shift and working night shift didn't meet significantly from the point that it was put in the 80s to today. Many code violations in terms of access, egress, fire safety in terms of fire separation from the rest of the facility. So significant upgrades there. And then to create enough room to meet standards for a clean room and a dirty room, which is part of fire safety code requirements now from a safety standard perspective with fire departments. We were starting to, we'd be taking up bay space for that public works currently utilize, and public works has had a space limitation for a number of years. So we'd be taking up space that isn't available technically. So it just, we solve one problem, create another problem. The amount of work and impact to that facility and scope to get to a certain level considers a significant renovation required, is why you see such a significant price there of a class D estimate of about $21 million, which also includes then the purchase of another facility for public works to work out of the store equipment, because we have an issue with admin space. That trailer does really need to go away. That's been sitting on that lot for quite some time. And if we're going to apply bylaws for temporary use permits and whatnot, we need to follow the same bylaws, which frankly was not the way this administration worked years ago. It was, we didn't have to follow our own bylaws is what we were told at the time. So we need to practice what we preach, in my opinion. That's the approach that we're taking here. So if we, you know, in short, if fire was to stay in the existing facility, they'd have to not be in the facility while the rentals are occurring, because a significant rentals would occur, taking up space that we don't necessarily have, that public works already is shy on space. So in that case, we look for a secondary place for Public Works to work out of, because I think they'd have 2 bays left to work out of in that building. And then look at a different space that either would for equipment and possibly administration space. So that's why you see that number is quite expensive. Third option then was to take the Cameron building, purchase a Cameron building and utilize that space as a new fire hall and do the required upgrades, because there's still upgrades there that's required: clean room, dirty room, fitness area for the firefighters, et cetera. But a lot of stuff's already in place. The admin space is pretty well solid there. There's already a dorm, so there's an apartment where you can house 2 firefighters if need be. That meets all the code requirements. And of course, as we talked earlier, in terms of a post-disaster facility, that facility also provides that piece. But I brought it up with council prior that regarding the servers, like our servers are still housed in Fort St. John. Because they said they're never coming back in this building. Having to do that move during the evacuation with this facility, knowing this facility is not a post-disaster facility. The intent would be to put those those servers in the in Cameron building, and part of the scope of work is to have that done, to build a new server room, and it creates a level of business continuity if we were to have a disaster sweep through this community where we can still operate effectively. And then similar with our hard copy files and whatnot, records that we need to maintain, they'll be stored down. They would be stored down the Cameron building also. When you do the math and look at the cost for the renovations, including to the purchase of the facility, so at 4.75 million, we think it's extremely reasonable price for that facility. It's well built, it's well upkept, and fairly new. And then the owner supplied, as part of the sales agreement, would be the owner would supply the required upgrades as part of that sales agreement to do the necessary renovations to bring that building up to code for firefighting activities and to house a fire department. So the total for that facility is just under $6 million, $5.7 million for the Cameron building when you add in the work that needs to be done. And then in addition to that, there's additional work that's required that now that we can do it, or from a scope perspective, now that we have a path forward or intend to have a path forward, the intent then is that we have the ability to do the work in that Public Works facility, because they have inadequate lunchroom space and washroom space over there, and just basic employee space, which a significant amount of work has been done on that building with the grant that we've had done, and that's listed in the report. And we'll still have some scope that is getting picked up by that grant. But the request for an additional $500,000 to come out of the facilities reserve is there to look after that scope, to get that lunchroom facility, which is a much needed overdue process. In terms of funds, again, this is something we've been working on for quite some time. So we've been putting funds into our buildings and facilities reserve fund, for 2 major, outside of doing typical renewal with buildings we currently own. 2 of the buildings that we know need significant funds invested into. One was Public Works. We knew we needed to do something for fire. And of course we have this facility. So the funds currently in the building facilities funds about 13,795,000 as of end of 2024. And then in addition to that, we received, I think in 22 or 21, I did the math, I can remember now. We received the grant funds of about just over 1.92 million, I believe, from the Growing Communities Fund, which was an upfront grant that the province provided municipalities, and there was a formula calculation based on space and population and whatnot. So anyhow, our amount equaled 1.92, and we haven't spent any out of that because we poked that to one side, because one of the criteria, one areas that you're qualified to utilize that funding and report on is new fire halls. you can actually put it towards that. So we have a plan for a small amount of funds coming out of that this year already, because that was how James was going to fund the new trailer that he's purchasing, the help me out, James, the rehab trailer. There was a $70,000 budget, which was being covered by that fund. And then the remainder of those funds sat in the bank and actually collected a little bit of interest, and we would apply those funds to the purchase of this facility also, because we have the ability to do that, which helps knock down what comes out of our buildings and facilities fund. So at the end of the day, our key benefits for this process is improved employee efficiency, our operational efficiency and safety, enhanced security of our municipal assets, so server, the ability from a business continuity perspective, for fire to be able to continue to operate. It could be utilized as a backup for our EOC if we needed to. And again, space possibly is an issue, but it's something that we'll have in case. And of course, we can self-fund the project, which we would want to have a conversation with a communication plan to the public. But we're not required based on legislation to have public approval from our, because we're not borrowing the funds. That was a lot.
That's a lot. Okay. Are there any questions for clarification for Mr. Barry? Councilor Roper, please.
Yeah, just to echo some of the comments in the previous meeting that, yeah, great report. Great solution here to an issue we've been kind of facing for a long time. So kudos to staff for coming up with this really outside the box solution. Yeah, I think my biggest concern is just making sure that the public is informed and involved. And I understand that we're not borrowing money, but the funds that we are using were levied off the tax base previously. So I feel like we owe it to the community to be as transparent as possible. And I think we're going to have be successful in communicating that to the public. So that was my only concern. And other than that, it's just it's a great solution. So thank you very much for all the hard work and the years that have been put into this.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I would agree with that. And I would say normally, to build a building or a significant renovation, you're borrowing money. And you've come up with a way to do this where we don't have to borrow money. But when you borrow money, there's a significant public process that goes with that, and everybody gets very familiar with what's happening when you're borrowing money. But I would agree with Councilor Roper that because we're not doing that, or at least we haven't decided it yet, but if we don't do that, the public should be made aware of what we're doing and why. And I think, that yourselves and everybody involved have made a great case with respect to this third option, which is the recommended option of buying the Cameron building and then finishing the renovation at the old fire hall for the public works. I think, you've done a great job. So I thank you for that. And also, I'd like to thank the owner who's offered this up, Ed Bully, who has, from all your accounts, has worked with you guys tremendously to make this deal so that this community can get a new fire hall. And then third, to the fire department themselves, who have been in that building and been using it since the fire last year. So we've had a test run essentially, and it'll be so now they know exactly what it is that they need. So the scope of work is designed so that they'll have exactly what they're looking for. And, I haven't seen a number with respect to how long that's going to last, but I'm sure it's a significant building. So I suggest there's probably 40 or 50 years in that building. And we'll look after a problem that two problems, I guess, that we've been having for quite some time. Now, the old fire hall, which will become the new, if this all goes through, it will become the new public works building. It might not make 50 years because it's an old building that's already being renovated, right? But it's an opportunity for them to expand out without us having to go buy another building out there. So I like the report. I like the way you're going to fund it. I agree with using the 1.92 billion. I forget the numbers, but whatever that
1.85.
Sorry,
1.85.
1.85 is what's left. So using our building reserve funds, which have built up to over 13 million. Remind me again, four point something coming out of building reserve?
We would have
4.35
4.35 at a building reserve.
Right, and that comes off to 13, so that puts it down to less than 10.
9.4
Yeah,
million.
9.4 million is what's, and what do we replace that at? And the question I'm going for is, how many years will it take us to sort of replace that based on the money that we've been putting into it over, the last 10 years, say?
In 2025, our contribution was 1.5 million.
So 1.5 million in 2025, is that
No.
sort of an average, a regular sort of amount that we get putting in there?
Typically anywhere from 1 to 1.5, but then of course annually we've removed funds from it too to do
Sure.
renewals. So I mean,
Sure.
I think you can look at that $1 million mark or just hover in around or just below, depending on what's occurring from a renewal perspective.
So we're looking at 4 to 5 years. of-
That would be the intent.
If our budgets remain more or less similar to what they are now, if our tax base remains similar, that we're looking at replacing that money into that building reserve in 4 or 5 years. Now, are we looking at any other buildings in the next 4 or 5 years that we have to have? This one, I guess there's some work that needs to go into this building, but otherwise, are we?
Besides our typical renewal, the big stuff we're looking at right now, I say big stuff, but it's a bit of a focus on some of the buildings at the airport. But
Right.
we're actually doing, there's an inventory there because there's some legacy buildings out there that just need to, quite frankly, go away. And then there'll be some work probably that because the maintenance shop itself had some significant work done about 15 years ago, 12 years ago. What the old fire hall, like where SARS is currently at, if we keep that facility, because it's not used as a fire hall at the airport, we do store a truck there at times. But we do store equipment in there and use it for operational purposes for the airport. So there will be some work occurring there, but we don't have that fully flushed out.
Okay, thanks. So if we're pulling 4 point some million out of that equipment, the building reserve fund, we have the ability to replace it in 4 to 5 years, all things being equal. And we don't have any obvious replacements in that time. So to me, it's the right place. It's the right place to pull the money from because it's going to be replaced.
We're in a reasonable spot and what we're doing, the background council is aware, we're doing a sustainable service level process, which includes updating and getting really under the hood of our buildings and facilities program. Which then helps determine, you start looking at that 5, 10, 20, 25-year window of what those replacements are. Cause I mean, the only other big ticket item down the road is we've got an extremely expensive facility across the road that we operate that has lots of replacement items down the road. That'll be on the list too, right? But frankly, I mean, from a financial perspective, we're in reasonable financial shape for that fund. And this is not creating any burden on the organization from a financial perspective.
Good. I'm just worried about tax base into the future. That's all. I'm being able to replace. Councillor Souls, please.
There's two things I'd like to mention. First of all, I would like to commend your acknowledgement of Ed and his work here, and Mr. Bully. I think it's actually very commendable when you've been a resident of Fort Nelson for a long time and lived through the heydays of extreme amount of money that went through many hands, so on, and to have private equity that is locked in here and is made available for the community in which a lot of that revenue is made. I think that's really commendable. I wish that more people could see the value of really sewing back investment into their own community, and that's a very commendable thing. Just one other communicative thing as far as how benefits to public that are not just from a numbers game, but I'll remind everyone that as we as a municipality keep our standards up to their legal requirements, so on, that also helps the insurance rates on and even an individual's house within the municipality. It's one of the factors used by the insurance companies to determine the insurance. So I think that it's a necessary thing and it's a benefit to everyone, including it's just plain a good deal.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions before we put a question on the floor?
I just like to throw a comment out, if you don't
Please.
mind, only because we did have obviously some discussions in camera. I think it's important to note that, like to add to the comments around Mr. Bully, I mean, Ed and Derek, his son, have been phenomenal through this process to deal with. There's definitely a sense of wanting to get back into the community. So the price of the building is less than what it was originally when he quoted it out last year, and the work that, you know, from an owner supply perspective, he's provided all the background and detail in terms of what the costs are, and there's no markup. And in some cases, there's a markdown where he's assuming the risk and has basically offered to have open books during the project so that, and provide us all the invoices. So that there's, not that we're questioning the cost, because we do lots of work, and there's a lot of scope of work here for a fairly, I mean, it's a bargain when you look at the ability to move into functionally a new fire hall that's going to last for years for less than $6 million. And it's communities out there right now are building fire halls for much more than 20, right? When you talk about the community of Fernie. So I can't say enough about Ed. The team here. So when the reason why I had these three gents sit at the table, between Harv, James and Sean, and Josh, some great work there in terms of getting under the hood and getting into the detail. You see James Emery online here. We had him there in case there's any questions from an engineering perspective. So he's the architect that's been working with us on this facility, town hall facility, and the required upgrades of the Public Works Fire Hall, and then of course the Cameron Building. He's been phenomenal work with Airedale, and of course, and he's brought the other subs in based on if it's mechanical, electrical, et cetera, in terms of an engineering perspective and structural, and you know, put up with us with the questions and the challenges and the scope changes and price changes and all this stuff. Because I mean, we pinched and did what we could in every angle. And of course, he worked directly with Ed and Ed's engineers to provide some numbers, which again, I think are extremely competitive. So just can't thank the group enough for that work.
Yeah, I would echo that, and thanks, James, for your report and the work that you did. Because essentially we're changing horses mid-stride here, right? We went from a big renovation on a building that was there, and those take a long time especially when you're relying on government grants to try to get that work. So it takes such a long time that sometimes, you know, opportunities present themselves in the time span of what you're trying to do with those renovations. So we really are changing horses in mid-stride here and in the middle of the race. And and there's a lot of scope changes that we were dealing with already with that building, with the, you know, with the foundation, with the roof, with changing requirements for what fire halls needed, clean rooms, proper showers, all of that was an ongoing process. And then to change and make a presentation, a report like this to, hey, we think this is even better than what we've been doing, and present it in a clear way. I think that was it. And I guess that's what I'm really thanking you for, is the way you've presented this report in a manner such that it really is understandable exactly what it is that we're doing. And I think when it comes back to the communication bit, I think there's a lot of really good information there that we'll be able to share with people and bring it back to that report. So yeah, so thank you for that. Any other discussion or comments then? Okay, there is a recommendation in the report. Would somebody like to make a resolution? Councillor Souls, please.
That a budget of 5.7 will be established to proceed with the purchase of 5013 Cordova Way as a new fire hall with the required renovations with 1.85 mil funds sourced from the Growing Communities Reserve Fund and the remaining funds from the Facility Reserve Fund. And that the fire hall and public works building foundation replacement budget be increased from 900 grand to 1.4 mil with funds sourced from the Facility Reserve Fund.
Thank you. That is moved by Councillor Souls. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Enax. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? Are there any opposed? Seeing none, that carries unanimously. Could I have a second resolution then that asks staff to put together a communication plan for this project?
I would move that.
Counselor Roper, do you want to word it differently or?
Just make sure that we have a communication plan that involves the public every step of the way and that we're ready to answer any questions that might come up.
Okay. So I'll just get the corporate manager to sort of read back what,
Moved by Councilor Roper that staff create a communication plan that involves the public and that we're ready to answer questions, answer any questions along the way.
okay. Do I have a seconder? Counselor Enox. Is there any discussion on that? We think that covers it? Okay, Counselor Gerwin, go ahead.
Yeah, I just didn't hear the word like a community presentation, but I suppose that that could be part of the communication plan that is going to be drafted.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
Okay, then, all in favor of the second resolution? Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes. Thank you very much. Okay, that takes us. Well, we already did the resolution to close council meeting. Are you comfortable with that? We've covered everything off that we need to
I
cover?
I need to cover one more. piece of
Okay.
Housekeeping up, and that's. Yes.
Okay,
I pointed these three here. We wouldn't have a lot of this information if we didn't pull Jazz, and she's been a rock star throughout this piece too. Harb's great at getting all the numbers and throwing everything in. Jazz takes them and sorts them out. So I'd be remiss if I didn't include her as a big thank you for Jasmine Glaves too.
so thank you, Jasmine, for all the work that you've done. Okay, adjournment is in order, please. Moved by Counselor Enoch, second by Counselor Roper. All in favor? Are there any opposed? Seeing none. Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.